This is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Richard Pusey? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I will put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, a look at the background of this case. I'll move to the timeline of the crimes, then offer my analysis. Richard Pusey was born in Melbourne, Australia in 1978. His father worked with flooring tile, and his mother was a nurse. He had one younger brother and one older brother. At age 10, Richard delivered newspapers. He attended 6 primary schools when he was young, before ending up at Mount Elisa Secondary College. His classmates remember him as a bully who was arrogant, disruptive, unkind, angry, and often involved in fights. After being accused of stealing computers and musical instruments in his second week of the 10th grade, the school invited him to depart and never return. His alleged crime was fairly sophisticated. The people responsible entered the building through the ceiling. After getting kicked out of school, Richard worked at a few fast food places before finding a job as a train station assistant. He then worked as a tram driver. He did this job for several years. After a collision, he was fired. He moved on to nursing. He did that for 2 years, after which he completed a certificate in financial management. Richard would work as a finance broker for 16 years. He seemed to be doing fairly well in his job. He was named one of Australia's top 100 brokers in a magazine there. He earned a lot of money doing this. He was able to purchase several properties and luxury cars. As he was advancing in his career, Richard was getting into a lot of trouble with the law. Details about offenses as a juvenile were never released due to the laws in Australia, but charges and convictions as an adult are available. Richard accumulated a total of 11 speeding fines from 2000 to 2019. He was a horrible driver. In 2008, when he was 30 years old, he was in an altercation with his girlfriend. Richard was charged with intentionally causing injury. He was given a suspended prison sentence. In 2014, he was fined $2,000 without conviction for working on a building without a permit. In 2016, he was arrested for low-level drink driving, which is like a DUI. In February of 2017, he was fined without conviction for contravening a personal safety intervention order. In May of 2017, he was fined without conviction for emitting unreasonable noise from a residence. So I'm picturing he was playing something like Miley Cyrus or Justin Bieber, and people complained, although playing music like that might be more of a felony. In November of 2017, he was found guilty of driving while suspended. In December of 2017, Richard entered into an argument at a bar called the Rook's Return on Brunswick Street in Melbourne after they refused to serve him. As he was walking out of the bar, he grabbed a bottle of gas, opened the valve on the top of it, and left it inside the door. As the gas was escaping from the cylinder, it made an incredible amount of noise. The gas was under a lot of pressure. Witnesses said it sounded like a jet engine. A person at the bar walked over and closed the valve as other people were screaming and running away. So we see a lot of different reactions to a gas cylinder. Richard was arrested and charged with reckless conduct, endangering serious injury, and other offenses. He was sentenced to 3 months in prison in early 2018. In May of 2018, so not long after getting out of prison, he was fined without conviction for several charges, including intentionally damaging property, stating a false address, and contravening a personal safety intervention order. This appeared to be one of his favorites. 2 months later, he was fined without conviction for using a carriage service to menace. This essentially means using any type of electronic communication system to harass or menace, like email, a cell phone, social media, text messages. On October 20, 2018, Richard involved himself in an argument with another man about a parking spot. He reached into the man's vehicle and pulled his keys out of the ignition. Richard would plead guilty to theft. On March 26, 2019, Richard was driving his Porsche when he cut off a motorcycle. The man on the motorcycle yelled at Richard before continuing on his way. After the man parked the motorcycle, Richard stopped and scratched the motorcycle with a key. He was charged with criminal damage. On August 27, 2019, Richard used emails to threaten a male bank employee, going so far as to reference the man's wife and children. He was charged with 4 counts of using a carriage service to menace and would eventually plead guilty. In September of 2019, Richard was on a flight from Brisbane to Melbourne when he started recording the crew and insulting them. He was removed from the plane and continued his aggressive behavior toward the police. He was eventually convicted for offensive and disorderly behavior and being a public nuisance. On April 22, 2020, Richard would be involved in the incident that would make him notorious. He was pulled over for driving over 90 miles an hour in his Porsche 911 Turbo S on the Eastern Freeway. Richard also had MDMA and cannabis in his system. As the police were getting ready to arrest Richard, they allowed him to urinate on the side of the road, so he was able to walk away from them a bit. At that time, a tractor-trailer drove onto the shoulder and slammed into 2 police cars and Richard's Porsche. 4 police officers were killed. The truck driver would later be sentenced to 22 years in prison. He had been driving while on drugs. Richard started recording the dead and dying officers at the scene. One of the officers' body cameras picked up Richard saying, quote, "There you go, amazing, absolutely amazing. All I wanted was to go home and have some sushi, and now you blanked my blanking car." Richard made additional statements about the officers using a number of expletives. When witnesses arrived at the scene and started helping the officers, Richard refused, saying, "They're dead." Richard apparently recorded 2 segments of over 3 minutes on his cell phone, again recording the dead and dying officers. He fled the scene, and the police would catch up with him later on. Richard had showed various friends these recordings, which of course is surprising. Who would have thought that Richard had any friends? The police arrested him and charged him with a variety of offenses. He managed to accumulate other charges while he was awaiting trial. On December 13, 2020, Richard started an argument with a clerk at a liquor store where he had been banned. The clerk would not let him buy a case of beer. Richard slammed the case of beer on the floor, breaking the bottles, and left without paying. He was charged with destroying property. Just 14 days later, the police were called to his residence. He grabbed a woman's wrist and pulled her up 2 flights of stairs and made threats to the police. He was charged with a number of offenses, including assault. Richard was sentenced to 10 months in jail after pleading to a few charges that covered various incidents. They all didn't stem from one particular incident. One of the charges is a charge that is rarely seen: outraging public decency. This was specifically because of the Eastern Freeway collision incident. When Richard was in jail, he was forced to sell a lot of his properties. His behavior has negatively affected his finances. He was released from jail on August 25, 2021. His lawyer was concerned for his safety out of jail. It would appear as though members of society should be the ones who are concerned for their safety, given Richard's propensity for criminality. Now moving to my analysis. First, I'll take a look at the mental health and personality factors. A mental health assessment report produced for the court indicated Richard had an enduring pattern of interpersonal problems, although he was able to function well in some workplace settings. Richard had a complex mixture of antisocial, narcissistic, borderline, and paranoid personality subtypes, difficulty regulating his mood, and a history of being hot-headed, impulsive, and volatile. The report indicated that Richard likely had ADHD, as well as antisocial and narcissistic personality disorders. Richard had fantasies about killing people, was always afraid of being arrested, and suffered from narcissistic rage. Given this assessment, Richard's potential personality profile may be something like mid-range openness, low conscientiousness, high extroversion, like he was assertive and sensation-seeking, low agreeableness, like he was antagonistic, and high neuroticism. He was angry and had difficulty resisting temptation. The judge who sentenced Richard to jail had some thoughts about his behavior as well, saying, quote, "He is a man who, in a range of settings, deliberately seeks to interfere with the sense of safety of those who encounter him," unquote. It appears as though Richard has recognized some of his own personality features. For example, during an interview with the police after the Eastern Freeway collision, Richard told them, quote, "I am highly offensive. I struggle every day to keep my mouth shut," unquote. Apparently, he lost that battle. Richard has been referred to as the most hated man in Australia. His extensive legal history only captures a portion of why the statement may reflect reality. He was involved in seemingly countless incidents of verbal abuse. On one occasion, he was recorded shouting at a woman who had cancer, telling her to get more blank cancer, and he hoped she died. As Richard was getting into trouble with the law, his parents created more distance between themselves and him. He also probably alienated a lot of other people. The more he was isolated from other people, the less positive social interaction and support he would receive. It was like a vicious cycle that he created. As far as I know, Richard has never been involved in extreme violence. Rather, he's accumulated a phenomenal number of comparatively less serious offenses, although they're still quite worrisome. He has made enemies just about everywhere. Richard appears to be a person who just can't resist being rude, reckless, condescending, confrontational, offensive, and antagonistic. It's interesting that the mental health assessment mentioned 3 of the cluster B personality disorders, specifically antisocial, narcissistic, and borderline. The only one left out was histrionic. The report also mentioned one of the cluster A personality disorders, paranoid. It's easy to see alignment between Richard's behavior and these personality features. The antisocial component would account for the criminality, impulsivity, and irresponsibility. The narcissistic component would account for having a sense of entitlement, lacking empathy, and being arrogant, condescending, and self-centered. The borderline component would account for the mood disturbance, like the difficulty in regulating emotions. And the paranoid component would explain the antagonism, vindictiveness, and how Richard frequently started arguments. People who are paranoid tend to get very offended from benign actions, like actions that aren't charged one way or the other, that are not actually threatening. They always feel like they're being threatened. This is a tough combination of personality traits. It's not surprising that Richard kept getting arrested. He was like a wrecking ball. Everywhere he went, he started trouble. People just wanted to keep their distance from him, not wanting to interact with him in any way. The mental health assessment specifically mentioned narcissistic rage. This is something I've talked about before. Narcissistic rage is different than other types of rage because it really has 2 components. First, there is the reactive component. The narcissist gets very angry when they are criticized. They may act impulsively and be aggressive in the moment. The second part is the instrumental component. This is the long-term piece of narcissistic rage. This is where the narcissist ruminates about that criticism. They get angry all over again. They plot revenge and carry it out. Narcissistic rage is destructive for many reasons, but the element that really makes it stand out is how the narcissist holds a grudge. So it's really that long-term component that makes it so dangerous. The narcissist cannot be satisfied with an immediate revenge. They need to get revenge in a more drastic way over an extended duration. They really want the person who criticized them to suffer profoundly. With Richard, there is a sense that his most offensive crimes may be yet to come. His potential is frightening. His fantasies about killing people are concerning. His drug use has been problematic, and his driving is horrible. Richard once told a friend that he had driven his car almost 190 miles per hour and was trying to get above 215 miles per hour. If society does not want to keep Richard in prison, then he should be monitored all the time with some type of probation. He should never be allowed to drive a vehicle again, drink or use drugs, or have access to any weapons. The criminal justice system in Australia has given Richard many chances to modify his behavior. The system believed that Richard could turn things around. He has used every opportunity to demonstrate how they have misplaced their trust in him. Those are my thoughts on the case of Richard Pusey. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comments section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.